I started here as a professor of Russian culture, and then I became a hospice social worker. And when I was working with patients and families in hospice, I discovered that people, no matter what age, were faced with critical decisions about people they cared about very much, never having thought about what they might need to do. I thought, as an educator, we can do better than this. We can start to have this conversation earlier. And so that's where the course grew from. It's a very odd thing that we've decided as a culture that the one thing we know that's going to happen to all of us, which is we're going to die someday, we don't talk about. And so if we don't talk about it, it doesn't actually make it better. So how do you make it better? So what we do is we look at a graphic novel. We used M.K. Cerwick's Taking Turns this time, about her time as a nurse in an AIDS ward. We also look at memoirs or ethnographies like Atul Gawande's Being Mortal. Because it's a service learning class, students go out to the community, and so they go out to Crowsdale, a continuous care retiring community. They go to Ronald McDonald House. Some of them have done their service learning at hospice. And the thing I think that makes me happiest is when students come back from a placement and say things like, old people rock. Because they're not expecting it. And we have very few places besides maybe with your grandparents that students and elderly people interact. And this creates the space for that to happen.
And then it's an insurance.
I believe that you can't do a good job of analyzing this work if you don't also take your personal feelings into account. So it's a mix of personal and academic reflection. People have the option of either doing a research paper on a topic that they care about, and they do creative projects. So I've had people do paintings. Somebody did a wonderful website on survivors of suicide. Somebody did a wonderful podcast with her. She's Chinese American. Her parents were both born in China, and she did a podcast of a conversation with them. And she was terrified to do it. And then by the end of the conversation, they're all saying, oh, we should have this kind of conversation more often. So, so there's a range of projects. But so really it's the reflection papers, one longer, more sustained reflection, and a final project. And then there's a project on cultures that you're not that familiar with and their practices around illness, death, or dying, or loss.
This is actually one of the nice things when you look at all of our health insurance right now. Medicare actually requires...
People will think about aging policy, will think about making changes in aging policy, that they will think about how to be doctors, not just in terms of chemistry and science, but in terms of relationship. And I have had many students come back from medical school interviews and say, all we did was talk about your class. So it has helped. You know, I have students who have gone on, one went on to be a Rhodes Scholar, others went on to be to Harvard Med School, Stanford, other great places. So it's highly motivated students, and it's a topic that I think, as difficult as it is initially for people to come to terms with, really gives them a lot. And I think often students are really surprised because once they know that we're going to be actually talking about death and dying, they don't expect it to be fun. And actually it's really important to process through drawing, to process through acting, and to realize that just because you're talking about this topic that we don't talk about, it doesn't mean your sense of humor has to go out the window.
What got you into Russian stuff?
I think having a relentlessly cheerful mother, actually.
You needed some darkness in your life.
I needed to know that it was okay to have a bad day.
or year.
Or year.
Decade.